What's up, it's Not, and welcome to my quickfire meta guide on the Warlock for TBC Classic. Yes, that's right, the boogeyman of the expansion is our topic for this video. I decided to make videos like this as I was ultimately unable to find the information I wanted to know from existing content, or at least presented in the ways I wanted, and that's how I'm going to break down this video. First, I'm going to look at the PvE basics and what 10 seconds in a raid might look like. Next, a brief overview of which racials will be best situated. Then I'll cover the strengths and limitations of the class, whilst finally covering professions and PvP in a broad sense, but for extra detail you may want to find specific guides on these topics for the full picture. On that note, let's get going, and to foreshadow what is about to come in this video about Warlocks, well, the hype is very real. There are a couple of options for Warlock when it comes to raiding. You can be Affliction, and if you're entering TBC without next gear to help you out, you may wish to go this route as it requires less gear thanks to suppression, making hit cap a breeze. Likewise, some raid groups will take an Affliction lock to provide the extra strong cursive elements that comes from the deep athlete talent Malediction. That said, however, the real heavy hitter that you've been hearing stuff about is Destruction Warlock. You can choose to specialise in fire spells and you will do good damage. But the real meta pick is the Shadow Spec, and that is what I'm going to focus on. If you've been playing Warlock in Classic WoW, this build will remind you a hell of a lot of DS Ruin. Demonic Sacrifice provides 15% more shadow damage, and that's entirely while we're here. Nothing else gives us any substantial boost, but Demonic Sacrifice is that strong. The rest of our points are going into the destruction tree. Quite frankly, we're doing the same points as we did in DS Ruin in Classic, except we are forgoing any affliction points in addition to our 10 new points from being level 70 to get to the big prize deep down in destruction, and that is Shadow and Flame. This 5-point talent is arguably the most impactful 5-point talent in the game for PvE in TBC. It boosts the spell damage gained from Shadow Bolt and Incinerate by 20%, and in the case of Shadow Bolt, this makes it the ability that has the single highest scaling in the game, bar none. So, that's our spec. What about the stats? Well, to keep this as concise as possible, they're all good, and they will be largely dynamic. However, the hit cap will be the bane of your existence in early TBC content, so much so that you may consider going Affliction or offer Deviant Favours to ensure there is an Elemental Shaman in your group without fail. Whatever pays the bills, am I right? Once you have hit sorted, however, haste typically pulls ahead of crit. Whilst this may be surprising, as Warlocks are often associated with big chunky Shadowbolt crits, this is because you get more haste percent per rating than you do crit percent per rating. But don't take that the wrong way. You aren't disowning crit just because haste gives you a little bit more bang for your buck. You want both. In short, you scale exceptionally well with all stats, and there is no prize for guessing what that means for the DPS meters. Now we're onto the rotation, and I'll tell you folks, it's really complex. First, you cast Shadowbolt, then you cast it again. Hold up for serious, you do get to maintain Immolate and you're assigned Curse too. But think of it like Penitence. You've chosen a spec that has a spell that scales way better than any other spell for those DPS meters. But Reverend Warcraft has heard your confession and has given you a path of repetition to atone for your sins. Now very quickly on racials, Orc are considered the top choices for PvE due to Blood Fury providing spell damage. PvP wise, Undead is probably the best choice thanks to Will of the Forsaken, but Orc and Blood Elf are also exceptionally strong choices and are arguably better depending on who you ask. So ultimately, those three are all fantastic choices. For the Alliance, Gnome is the clear choice thanks to a little bit more mana and Escape Artist for both PvE and PvP, but this decision is far less impressive when you compare it to the Horde options, so if you don't have a preference for faction, go for one of the Horde racials. However, To add on to this, I would suggest that Warlocks are so strong, pick whatever you like to look at, you'll drop bombs regardless. Only min-max race if you're chasing those super high pass rankings. Now, I told myself I would try and foreshadow in this video, and I think I've kind of missed the nuance that requires. As my praise suggests, the strength of the Warlock is that it has insane damage potential. Not just single target, all encounters. Warlocks are there battling for top spot and in many cases just running away with it, especially in AoE encounters. Seed of Corruption is a super balanced spell. In fact, so balanced, other party or raid members can trigger the detonation. Yeah, that was changed in Pandaria, but there is no hindsight in legacy content, so we have the OP Chat Edition that will melt your details. With that said, let's get on to the catch. And to be honest, there really kind of isn't one. I racked my brain for this, and quite simply it comes down to maybe two small caveats. First, your rotation in PvE may actually bore you into oblivion, but if you're a meta monkey that lives and dies on personal performance in a raid, the numbers will more than make up for it. And just a note, I'm not hating. If you're a meta monkey that wants to all over bosses and other players with the least possible resistance, hey man, I respect the hustle, and this class is for you. So excuse me before I get sidetracked, but this second caveat that I'm talking about is due to the supreme power you have in both PvE and PvP, as we're going to see. Many players will play Warlock, and it's just not infinitely stackable. Whilst some super meta comps may be born once we get official TBC servers that involve more than the typical 3 to 5 Warlocks we usually see on private servers, due to the way TBC has been designed in terms of raid encounters, I'm not sure you'll ever be able to see any egregious stacking like you see with warriors in Classic WoW at the moment. As such, you're going to have a bunch of competition for those Warlock spots if you haven't found a guild or are thinking about changing guilds or servers or whatever in the future. Just a thought. With that said, no guild is going to want to raid without those 3 to 5 Warlocks at the least, so life really won't be that bad. Oh, and God forbid if you're a meta monkey but pull the short straw on being the Affliction buff bot. Whilst Affliction has a far more engaging playstyle, it's not the same as blasting gigantic shadow bolts as big as laser beams and chilling atop the meters if you're that guy. That brings us to professions, and the Supreme Leader says hello as always, and to be quite honest, Reverend Raid Leader should probably expect you to be playing leatherworking if you're accepting the supreme gifts of the Warlock class. As I mentioned in all these videos, leatherworking will be essential. Raid leaders will want 20 minimum if your guild is metagaming. However, if by some underground tunnel and fake passport combo you escape the leatherworking tyranny, you should be looking at tailoring, enchanting and jewel crafting again as your next best options. Tailoring provides a ton of early game epics that will genuinely be your best options all the way up to the end of tier 5 or early tier 6. Likewise, it has the Bisque game chess piece. Jewel crafting on the other hand has the better gems as always, with the extra damage boost being significant pre-Black Temple, whilst also having the Bisque game netcraft. That said, Twin Neck comes pretty damn close for Warlocks because they scale so well with all secondaries, so it's worth noting that jewel crafting may not be quite as appealing as for other classes, or casters I should say, but that said, it's a really top choice. Once again, we've got enchanting providing us a 24 free spell power, and this will typically be stronger than jewel crafting gems once you get to the tier 6 release, where everyone has access to some form of epic gem for their gear. A thing to note of course is that you can drop enchanting after applying the 24 spell power if you already have Bisque rings, because it will be retained even when you drop it. I often leave this section of the videos thinking I've done engineering a disservice each time, and I will touch on it very briefly. The goggles are good at both the start and the end of the game, but given that this is through the lens of picking somewhat optimal choices, sadly I just can't recommend it for reasons of longevity or it being pure Bisque. Neither of those are true. Now, finally, we are on to PvP. And you think there's going to be a 180 from the tone of the PvE content for Warlock? You're wrong. Warlocks are incredible in TBC PvP, even after several nerfs by the time 2.4.3 rolls around. The playstyle changes quite drastically in PvP. You're typically going to be an annoying live lord rather than a turret of unbelievable damage. Not that you don't do good damage, just it's a different style. And this is because Warlocks get the famed union of Siphon Life and Soul Link due to the higher amount of talent points available at 70. Now you're going to take that spec, and in 2s your best option is typically going to be alongside a Resto Druid. Needless to say, this can take the games super long, but it's really good. You can also have similar success with a Disc Priest, but generally Druid is seen as a superior option in 2s, especially when you're looking to take the game a bit longer. As far as double damage goes, SL, and Rogue is one of the best double damage options and is very strong when played well. Before someone points out 2v2 shadow play not being mentioned, I'm going to touch on it briefly. From memory, this was a dominant 2s comp for some time. However, over the patches, both Shadow and SL got nerfs that reduced how dominant this comp is compared to what people will remember it as in the early arena seasons on live, assuming we get a balancing patch of 2.4.3. That said, it's still a strong comp, just not quite top tier. When we get to 3s, you have more options, but you'll typically be taking that Resto Druid friend and finding an Arms Warrior to complement your ability to take the game long. In fact, this may be the fabled RMP Slayer as far as equally skilled opponents go, but we'll have to see how things shake out on live servers, but it's certainly a super good composition given how prevalent it is at the top of the Endless and Atlantis ladders. Again, Disc Priests can play in the Resto Druid role, and when we talk about our Rogue friend from 2s, you can also transition with that person into 3s with the pickup of a Resto Druid or Disc Priest for another top composition for 3s. Spell Cleave with a Mage and Disc or Resto Druid is also very potent for experienced players, whilst Shadow Play with a Resto Shaman is a strong comp, though not quite at the same level as the previous ones mentioned. As always, 5s, and that brings us to the end of the video, and this time I'd like to know what class or spec you'd like to see next. Let me know in the comments. Also, a big thank you to those who have chosen to subscribe and like the videos. It's a lot easier to do those things when thousands already agree with you, so thanks for supporting the content so soon, I deeply appreciate it. And with that said, I'll see you next time, hopefully in your notifications.